Hi, I'm just going to do a little introduction. I'm Colin Pemberton. I'm here with Sarah Parlow, and I'm here to talk to her about her podcast, Conscious Quest. To start off, do you want to just talk about what inspired you to make this podcast? Because I find it very interesting how you're doing a lot of talking about dismantling like these thoughts that we've built up and like exploring ourselves and like what inspired you to want to share that with people.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for talking with me, Colin. I'm so happy to share. So Conscious Quest was born on a hike that I had with a friend of mine probably about a year ago. And we were talking about state of the world, politics, social issues, so many things. And I think, I don't know which one of us turned to the other and said, this would be great stuff for a podcast. And Rishi, my partner in the podcast, had said, well, I have some equipment, I have a microphone, we could do this. And so I reached out to him the next day with a treatment for the first three episodes and said, I'm willing to do this if you are.
Awesome.
And so that's how it came to be born. And really, it came from a place of being passionate about shedding light by zooming out on the bigger picture of what is going on in the world, in the United States right now. Specifically, I was looking at politics and also LGBT rights, and also to really look at the ways that our minds can fool ourselves, right? So, kind of looking at consciousness, how to stay conscious in the modern world.
That's awesome. And I feel like a lot of people need that right now. Just kind of that, um, like that step back, look at the big perspective here. Where did you learn about exploring your consciousness?
I could go back as far as to my college days when I have a degree in psychology, first of all. So I think by nature, people who study psychology are interested in the human behavior and the mind and things like that. But I've always been a seeker. I've always been fascinated by spirituality and the ways that we get kind of stuck sometimes in our own thoughts and our own thinking. Also, I have just felt the need to take some responsibility and interject my thoughts into the space. I think podcasting is an incredible way to do that. And it's got a fairly low bar to entry. And I just felt like we were in such a critical time that it was important for us to talk as a culture about how things are. And perhaps I think we're in this interesting time where because of the internet and the information sharing, we can see how sometimes we're told how to think and feel, and narratives are spun a certain way. And how do we dissect that to really know what is the truth? Because we are in, as much as we're in the information age, we're in the misinformation age.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And I feel like it's interesting. You've talked about like dismantling those institutions that like try to put you into a box, and that's just such a important thing. And it's just, I guess, just if there's anything else about how where you think that interest in you comes from.
So I had the benefit of being pulled into a coaching program as a guest. And I completed this transformational coaching program led by Jim Fortin because I was like a plus one for a friend of mine. And there's something really magical about the coaching space and the transformational space. And what I saw for me is that it moved the needle a little bit more for me than other things I've tried, like therapy or just whatever self-exploration. So again, always been a seeker. I've studied a lot of different world religions. And so what I have found is that there are certain connection points that keep happening. There are patterns across all of them. And so what can we distill down from that? Because I think what we're getting at is the common human experience, right? We're all looking for something higher, right? We have our mortal selves and then we have our potential selves. When I was introduced to the coaching space, and I am a certified life coach now, I just found that coaching is really about closing that happiness gap. which is the gap between where we are and where we want to be in life. And what's getting in the way of that, right? And it tends to be our subconscious beliefs, our limiting beliefs. And there are ways that we can shift these things, which we think are so ingrained in us. And they are, until we do what Carl Jung said, which is unless we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule us and we will call it fate, right? So until we are aware of what is keeping us down, what is holding us back, what are those limiting beliefs, they do haunt us and they can be changed. And there's a lot of modalities in which to do that. And so what I'm passionate about is having received the benefit of some of that change, I want to help other people to find ways to change because in the end of the day, I see myself as an authenticity coach. I want to help people find their most authentic version of themselves, which is separate than what the world tells us and informs us that we are. Who we are authentically comes from here, comes from the heart, and it is separate from all the world conditioning. And so I do believe the pathway through that to get to the authentic self is through vulnerability, which is an uncomfortable thing for a lot of people in modern life. And how do we throw so many things at our vulnerability, right? We throw addiction, we throw, food, sex, money, shopping, excess of any sort. But ultimately, when we get quiet with ourselves and embark on the longest journey, which is the 18 inches from here to here, from your head to your heart, that is the longest journey most of us go on in our lives. And how do we connect to our heart space and live from there? That is authenticity. And that is what I feel I've done a lot of work with in my life, and I want to help others do the same.
With your different episodes, you've had a lot of really amazing guests with different comedians and I saw you had like actresses and stuff like
Yeah.
that. What was that process like? Were those people you knew prior to recording, or did you reach out to them?
Yeah, it's a funny thing living in Los Angeles, right? You are just the connection points are always there. And so I did really reach out to a lot of my circle. I know a lot of people. And so when I was looking for people to contribute, right, some of their thoughts and pearls, whether it was about, you know, um, manifesting your dream or about finding your soul's calling, like I did with Asta, who was the comedian that you mentioned. A lot of times people are thinking the same thing, and it just takes someone to stand up and say it. And then we all kind of feel seen
Mm.
and feel heard. So every person has some valid things to bring to the table. Um, Specifically, through my partner Rishi, I came across Sandra Cox, who is a psychiatrist who lives down near Temecula. And Rishi often jokes like Sandy should run for president because she's just so aware and awake and just has so many valid thoughts on so many of the pressing issues that we deal with today. And she was on the show twice, and her episode, one of them was the most watched episode of the series. Um, so I think you just kind of have to get your feelers out there. And I'm again very blessed to live in a large metropolitan city that has access to a lot of people of different thoughts and backgrounds.
Yeah. No, that's amazing that, well, like you did that work to make your network work for you, and that takes skill and charisma.
Thank
Um,
you.
but so going into back to like the very start of this, how was the process of making the first episode? What was that day like?
Hmm. Very rudimentary. So I showed up at Rishi's office. He owns a mental health clinic where they do a lot of novel therapies like ketamine infusions or other mental health services. And we basically recorded the first episode on my laptop, the one I'm using right now. And we signed into, there was a podcasting website right? That we just created a profile on. So, and we just off the cuff talked for like 20 minutes just to kind of get our thoughts down. And after that, like I said, I had a plan of the different guests and topics that I wanted us to cover, and we embarked on that. But I would say the first one is just the hardest. And I think what we have to do as people who want to execute ideas is let go of perfection.
Mm.
That was my lesson here, is that my coach, Jim Fortin, said, if it's 80% done, you're done, because it's never going to be 100% perfect or done. You strive for excellence, but not perfection. And so I felt like the magic was in the doing, in just doing it and having movement going forward. And after we recorded that episode, and I think I was on 2 or 3 or 4 before I started working with a friend of mine to really process the sound, and also to start creating artwork through Canva. And fortunately, the program I use to record on is called Riverside, and that creates a really nice video component with captions and logo. So it was like slowly piecing everything together over time. And I think my commitment was just to try and make every episode better than the last one, which was something I felt was achievable, but it was quite a steep learning curve on the first episode. And I think you could see the evolution over time if you listen.
Going into first side, what was a big positive change you felt you saw as you developed the podcast more?
I think I just got really a lot more comfortable with being on camera. I mean, I have acting experience, as you know, but learning how to speak on a podcast, one of the skills I learned was to slow down how I speak. Because when we start to talk fast, that's where we get a lot of the ums and you knows, which sound awkward. So I have become a lot more cognizant of how I speak publicly and how to really convey thoughts in a way that I feel will be better received by people. So that was an important skill to have. And then I would also say resourcefulness. I think anytime you are spearheading a project, you really tap into like, I don't know how to do all of this. And what I found, fortunately, also living in Los Angeles, if I had a question about anything, how to start the podcast, who to go for sound, who to get a logo made by, I generally had someone in my circle I knew who to ask
Yeah.
to help me with that. And so I was able to pool those talents and execute some pretty high production for essentially a one-woman show. I mean, I had my partner Rishi, but he mostly just showed up to some of the recordings, securing guests and recording and processing the sound and creating clips and uploading everything rested on me. So it really forced me to grow a different part of myself.
And then on the flip side, what was, I guess, a big obstacle that you had to overcome?
I think as a creative, this is a universal experience. It's really vulnerable to put your work out into the world.
Yeah.
It's slightly terrifying. It's like you're really opening up your soul. And I would say the most vulnerable thing I did was the last episode for the season that I've completed, episode 16, where I brought my sister on the show. And we had a pretty spontaneous and vulnerable discussion about our childhood, specifically. So people know I am a transgender woman. And so I really dug into like, what was that experience having a trans sister growing up? I mean, I was 19 when I transitioned. I felt like in the environment that we're in right now, where there is so much uh, dialogue about this topic and it's really heated, I felt like it was really important for someone like me to stand up and, dispel some of the ignorance. And I approached my sister and said, would you be willing to do this? Because this is the type of support that I need right now. And I was scared to even ask her. And she responded back almost immediately with a resounding yes. And I mean, there were a few times on that episode when I broke down into tears to really talk about, my experience. And, actually, I take it back. Sandy's was not the most watched episode. I think in the end of everything, that episode with my sister was the most watched episode. It was like when after we shot it, I had to step away for several days before I edited it. And even then I was in so much resistance of like, should I even publish this? And then I did, and I was amazed by the response that I got. But it's terrifying as an artist to open up, as you know.
No, that's amazing. And I can't imagine the amount of strength it took to be able to not even just talk about that, but to edit it and post it and like put it out for the world is that just takes a lot of strength, and not a lot of people can do that. But yeah, just to wrap up here, I don't want to keep you too long, but is there anything else you would want to like share with your people who listen to your podcast about what it's like behind the scenes? Like,
It is a lot of production. Like you don't realize how many steps it takes to just get like a 45-minute or hour-long podcast onto the air. And, part of it is self-inflicted, right? Because I want social media, I want to spread the word. I mean, just editing a clip, to pull segments to get people to watch takes a lot. And you don't always get like people slowing down on social media to sit and watch a minute. That's a really hard thing to do, to get people to watch 30 seconds or a minute of anything. There's just a lot of production that goes into it. It made me appreciate what other professional podcasters do. And I think for anybody out there, I would just highly recommend that if you have an idea, to just really go with it, commit to it, and execute it. Even if it doesn't have the impact that you think it does, the growth that it creates for you is incredible. And you never know how you might really affect just one person out there who really needs to hear your message and your voice. I think we are in a time where we're going to realize how much we really need to rely on each other, despite the fact we're in a culture right now that is so divided. Um, it is our common humanity which is going to save us. So I really implore people to lead with that. Again, the longest journey that you'll ever make is from here to here. So please lead from your heart.